Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Legal Gym Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about what to do after you set up your LLC. Now, for the show notes for today's episode, which will include all of the links and resources for everything that I'm going to be discussing today, make sure you head on over to hawthornelaw.net/after. Once again, that's hawthornelaw.net/after. All right, let's dive in. Now, if you recently set up an LLC for your business, and we talked about in last week's episode some of the major mistakes I see people making with their LLCs and setting up their LLCs, make sure you don't miss that episode. You may be wondering what you should do next. This is one of the most common things I get asked about by entrepreneurs who have scheduled a strategy session with me. Unfortunately, filing some paperwork with the Secretary of State where you live is just not going to be enough to make sure your LLC is run properly. But this is what a lot of people do. They file their articles of organization with their state, they pat themselves on the back, and then go about their business thinking everything is set up just fine. If this is what you've done or what you're thinking about doing, then you have made actually quite a big mistake. Filing your LLC with the state is only the first of many things that you must do legally if you want to make sure your business is properly protected. So today I wanted to walk you through, I've got a list of things. I think I originally had 6 things I want to talk about, but I've actually upped that list to about 8 things I want to talk about. Things that you need to do after you've set up your LLC to make sure you're on solid legal ground. Now, the first thing is to prepare an operating agreement. I talked about this a little bit on last week's episode, and it's really important that you have an operating agreement. If you file your LLC and you do not have an operating agreement, then you're going to be bound by the statutes in your state regarding how your LLC is to be run. And the problem with that is the statutes in many states, even if they follow the model LLC codes, they can be complicated, hard to understand, and subject to interpretation depending on various case law. Now, to avoid that, you want to have an operating agreement in place that's crystal clear about how the LLC is going to be run, how it's going to be taxed, who the owners are going to be, how you're going to take distributions, different things like that, what's going to happen if there's a conflict between owners. And so you want to make sure you have a good operating agreement in place. If you head on over to the show notes page for today's episode, I'm going to include a link to an operating agreement that you can get from my One Stop Legal template store that will set you up for success. And it's basically a plug and play. You just fill out some blanks in the operating agreement. You're going to be good to go. If you're a single member LLC, this is probably going to be sufficient for you. If you're a multi-member LLC, then I would recommend, in other words, if you have partners in your business, then I would recommend you talk to a lawyer in your state who can help you draft an operating agreement that's going to work for you and your partners. You're going to need more than what this single member LLC operating agreement would provide. So that's number one. Make sure you get that operating agreement in place. Number 2 is to get your EIN number. This is a relatively straightforward process. You can go to the IRS website and you can request it online and get it in just a few short minutes. I will mention, however, if you're running your LLC from outside the United States, if you do not have a social security number, if you're not a U.S. citizen, then you are going to have some issues and you're going to need to jump through some additional hoops to get your EIN, and you'll probably want some help doing that. But if you're a U.S. citizen and you've got a social security number, or you already have a tax ID number and you're a legal resident of the United States, then it should be fairly easy. You go to the IRS website and you should be able to get that done. The third thing you need to do is make sure you go ahead and you want to take the EIN number you've just gotten. And I should mention about the EIN number. Once you get it from the IRS, you can download the paperwork that's got your EIN number on it. Don't forget to do that. That's going to be the only notification you will receive from the IRS of what your EIN number is. If you forget to do that, you're going to need to go back to the IRS, and it's going to be a big hassle to try and get a record of what that EIN number is. So make sure you download that paperwork and keep that in a safe spot for your business, because you're going to need that for what I was starting to say is number 3, which is to open a business bank account. Now, it's very important. One of the big mistakes I see people make with their LLCs is they they commingle their business and their personal assets. So they open up their LLC, but then they use their personal bank account to run the finances of the business. And that's a problem. That's just going to be difficult for you to justify when it comes tax time, or if your LLC ever gets in trouble and you get sued, things like that. Then there's going to be that commingling, which is going to pierce the corporate veil, and that's going to be a problem. So you want to make sure that your that you have a business bank account that handles your business expenses, and that's where you deposit checks and revenue from your business. And you'll need that EIN number. You're going to need that operating agreement that you've drafted to go ahead and set that up with the bank. And I have a recommendation of who I would recommend for your business bank account. And again, that'll be in the show notes page for today's episode. Once you have your business bank account set up, the next thing you want to do, besides making an initial deposit into the account, you can make what's called an owner contribution to the business bank account, which is basically you investing in the business. Once you've done that, you want to go and get the proper business licenses. Now, this is something that's going to be it's going to vary depending on the state you live, the county you live in, the city you live in, any of those things. Every state has, and local municipality has a different set of requirements in terms of what is required and what isn't required for a business license. So you want to check with your city, state, county, where you live to make sure that you've got the proper business licenses for your business. And so usually you can go online and figure out that information, or you can go down to your local government building and talk to somebody there about what you're going to need for your business. The fifth thing that you're going to need to do for your LLC is to make sure you get your contracts in place. Now, you might already have some contracts that you've got for people you've been working with or for your website that you used while you were a sole proprietor. But once you form that LLC, you need to make sure all of those contracts are updated. So your terms of service for your website needs to be updated with your LLC information. Your privacy policy needs to be updated with your LLC information. If you have a contract in place for people that purchase your products or services online, you need to make sure that's updated. If you have employees with employment contracts or contractors who you've hired to do work for your business, you're going to want to make sure those are all updated with the proper information for your LLC. And there's just a number of contracts you may need for your business, and you just want to make sure all of them have the LLC listed as a party to that agreement. So if you initially sign those contracts as yourself personally as a sole proprietor, you need to go back, look at all those contracts and make sure they're updated to reflect and re-executed if necessary to reflect that now the LLC is a party to that contract. The sixth thing that you're going to need to do is get business insurance. Now, I've done whole videos about this on my YouTube channel, why this is important, but essentially it comes down to this. An LLC will protect your personal assets if something happens, if your business for some reason gets sued. But what it will not do is provide a means to pay out that claim if the LLC gets sued. Business insurance will step in, and they will, if you have business insurance in place, they will hire a lawyer for you who will defend the claim against your LLC and then make sure that claim gets paid properly. So it's a really inexpensive way to provide an additional layer of protection for your LLC. It's something I highly recommend that you consider getting. Again, a link to a preferred provider is going to be in the show notes for today's episode. But you do want to make sure you get business insurance in the name of the LLC. And this could be anything from a general liability policy to workers' comp insurance to malpractice insurance to any business insurance. Kind of covers a broad range of different types of coverages. So you want to make sure you get that in place to ensure total and complete protection for your limited liability company. Number 7 is you want to sign up for payroll. So if you're just running as a sole proprietorship and you are paying estimated taxes every quarter or so, you should be fine. You may not need payroll, but once you start hiring employees, you're definitely going to need a payroll provider. If you decide to be taxed as an S corporation, then you will also need to sign up for a payroll service. There's a link to a company that I recommend in the show notes page for today's episode. The company is Gusto. They're great. I've been using them for multiple years. I use them for 2 of my companies, and they do a great job. They do a lot more than payroll. They do benefits and other things as well. So definitely consider signing up for a company like that. And again, link in the show notes page to get signed up with them. The last thing I would recommend for you is to consider registering your trademark or assign your trademark if you already have one. So this is something without a trademark in place, you really don't own the name to your business, and you want to make sure you own the name to your business for a variety of reasons. And so that's the last thing I would talk to you about doing today. And I've done other episodes about why trademarks are important and how to go about registering your trademark. And I'm probably going to recover those topics in future episodes. But for right now, I just want you to understand that this is another thing that you need to put on your checklist to do, is to consider registering the trademark for your brand. Also, you could have products that you're selling that may need to be registered as trademarks. You could have a slogan, you could have a logo, you could have a podcast, anything like that that you need to think about registering as a trademark. You want to make sure you get that done. So once again, the 8 things that I mentioned today that you need to do after you set up your LLC is to, number 1, prepare that operating agreement. Number 2, get your EIN number. Number 3, open a business bank account. Number 4, get the proper business licenses for your business. Number 5, get your contracts in place and in order. Number 6, get business insurance. Number 7, sign up for payroll. And number 8, consider registering your trademarks with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. All right, all you Legal Gym listeners, now that you know more about what to do after you set up your LLC, you are ready to implement. Because if there's one thing we love to do over here at the Legal Gym, it's to take massive action. So if you haven't already, make sure you check out the show notes page for today's episode. You can get a rundown of all the links and resources we talked about here today by visiting hawthornelaw.net/after. That's hawthornelaw.net/after. That's going to be the home base for all of your legal and business tools and resources to help you start, build, and of course, legally protect your very own online business. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And I should mention that the next episode is one you're definitely not going to want to miss. It's going to be talking about how to make sure you pay yourself properly with your LLC. We touched on that a little bit today when we talked about payroll providers, but we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail in the next episode. You don't want to miss that one. Thanks so much, folks. Have a great week.